Well, folks, welcome to our first spring webinar in the Finger Lakes Forecast series. Um, I'm Gay Nicholson. I'm the president of Sustainable Finger Lakes, and I'm really glad to have you all with us today as we explore this critical issue of hyperscale AI data center development in New York. I'm joined by Emily Law, our research coordinator, and our excellent panelists. We're offering this webinar series as a place where we can learn together about the forecast for how climate change is going to impact our lives and our regional economy in the coming decades. Our webinars are at noon on the first Wednesday of the month, but if you can't join us then, you can just register for them and we'll send you a link to the recording. Our next webinar is going to be on April 8th, when we will take a look at how changing climate conditions are increasing the risk of wildfire in our region and what we should be doing to adapt and prepare for that. But today we are going to explore an issue that might not seem to be connected to climate change on the surface, but is becoming a growing threat due to high energy consumption and greenhouse gas emissions. We've had data centers scattered across the nation for really many years now, but the pace and scale of development has reached unprecedented levels lately as the so-called race for artificial intelligence has turned into a bit of a speculative bubble and a free-for-all with almost no regulatory boundaries to protect host communities, electric ratepayers, and our environment. You may have heard about some of the communities and families that find their lives suddenly disrupted by a huge data center that their local officials allowed to be built near their homes. The most common complaint for the nearby folks is the unceasing noise that is almost impossible to drown out. While noise-related illnesses are developing and property values falling for these neighbors, the broader region is discovering significant increases in their electric rates due to the market competition from data centers that can consume more electricity than their entire city. Saddest of all to me is the sense of powerlessness of these folks once the data center has been built and is running. A city council member from Chesapeake, Virginia had this to say: once they're built, there's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can do. If they violate the decibels, what are you going to do? Fine them $1,000? That'd be like me asking you for a penny. Seriously, though, once this thing is built, it's all over but the crying. And that's why we're gathered here today. We don't want to be victims with no recourse of deep pocket AI investors. We've got to find ways to protect our own interests as a community. And that's why some municipalities and now 12 states are taking a look at moratoriums on data center development. So with us today are three people with substantial knowledge about the data center race and its implications. I'm so pleased to have my new friend and colleague, Eric Weltman, with us today. Eric is based in Brooklyn and is a senior organizer with Food and Water Watch, the organization that started the conversation on data center moratoriums at the national and state level. He's a writer and organizer with over 35 years of accomplishments, building progressive power, leading environmental and social justice campaigns, and winning policy and political victories. His successes include helping ban fracking in New York, closing nearly all the medical waste incinerators in Massachusetts, and electing the first Latino to the Boston City Council. Eric has extensive experience conducting trainings on media, lobbying, organizing, and public speaking. He's going to start us off with an overview of the national situation with AI data centers. Then we'll hear from Allison DeSario, who got involved with the opposition to the TerraWilth proposal in Cayuga Lake last September after learning about their plans and educating herself on the struggles of other communities dealing with AI data centers. She's been a vocal supporter of the resistance on social media, doing research, attending official town meetings to stay up to date with the proposal process. Her main concerns are focused on our grid capacity and electric prices, the environmental impacts of constant noise and light pollution from a data center on a lakefront property, and the moral and ethical issues with AI, such as citizen surveillance and military usage. Allison is one of the founding members of the citizen group Finger Lake Strong that has organized to oppose the data center project in Lansing. And then we'll hear from Anna. I've known our Assemblywoman, Anna Kellis, for close to 20 years now, and I know just how brilliant, hardworking, and fair-minded she is, and how fortunate we are to have her representing the 125th Assembly District for Tompkins and Cortland counties. Since taking office in 2021, Assemblymember Kellis has sponsored and passed legislation to protect public health, critical natural lands, and underrepresented communities. She brought international attention to the environmental concerns of consolidated cryptocurrency mining using proof of work validation methods. Just some of her legislative accomplishments include securing state protection for thousands of acres of critical lakefront forest lands and parkland, expanding the ban on hydraulic fracking to include a ban on carbon dioxide, establishing a moratorium on cryptocurrency mining using fossil fuels, while requiring a full environmental statewide assessment on the impact of the industry on our ability to achieve our climate law, and creating a statewide comprehensive water database to promote comprehensive water quality protection. Once again, Anna is providing essential leadership to her district and the entire state by sponsoring a data center moratorium bill in the Assembly, and will share with us the issues and rationale behind hitting the pause button in New York State. After we hear from our panelists, we're going to open it up for questions and discussion, so please feel free to use the Q&A button to submit your questions to the panelists, and then we'll deal with those at the end of the presentations. So let's go ahead and get started. Eric.
Good afternoon. My name is Eric Weltman, and I'm a Brooklyn-based senior organizer with Food and Water Watch, a nonprofit environmental organization. Food and Water Watch's mission is to oppose corporate control and abuse of our most vital resources: the water we drink, the food we eat, the air we breathe, the climate we rely on, and to ensure that government fulfills its obligation to protect our health, communities, and environment. In New York, we're perhaps best known for helping lead the successful fight to ban fracking, and along with legions of incredible allies, we're continuing to work to move New York off fossil fuels, opposing fossil fuel infrastructure, the pipelines and power plants that transport and burn fracked gas, and supporting policies to decarbonize and green our buildings. One final preliminary note. Organizing is all about relationships. Everything we do at Food and Water Watch is built upon the relationships that we have with activists, allies, and elected officials, and the relationships we have with the people on this call, with Gay, with Assemblymember Kellis. They're so valuable. They're like gold to us. We're grateful for the opportunity to participate in this webinar and grateful for the ongoing partnership we have with you all. These are indeed difficult times, challenging times, but together we will persist and we will prevail. So, the explosive growth of data centers is one of the biggest affordability and environmental threats of our generation. This expansion is rapidly increasing demand for energy, driving more fossil fuel pollution, straining water resources, and raising electricity prices. All this compounds the significant and concerning impacts that data centers are having on our society, including lost jobs, social instability, and concentration of wealth. The scale and speed of data center development have accelerated so quickly that government has not had the time or the space to systematically evaluate the impacts and put thoughtful guardrails in place. As a result, key economic and environmental questions remain unresolved, and communities are being asked to absorb risks before clear standards are established. These reasons inspired Food and Water Watch to become the first organization to call for a national moratorium on data centers, and why, along with a host of allies and incredible elected officials like Assemblymember Kellis, Senator Liz Krueger, and Senator Kristen Gonzalez, we're thrilled to be working to pass the state-level moratorium here in New York. I'd like to spend a few minutes diving a bit more deeply into our analysis of the problems with data centers, and also note seven links that we'll send to you in a follow-up email. First, we'll share the links to the Senate and the Assembly bills, including an indication of the current co-sponsors. Second, a link to an online action that will enable you to send a message to your own legislators in support of the bill. Third, a link to a press release about a sign-on letter that we released last week, signed by over 100 organizations in support of the bill. Fourth, a link to the form for additional organizations who might want to sign on to the letter. And fifth and finally, two resources, a fact sheet and a press release about a report we released last week about data centers. These documents, which I'll draw on for the rest of my presentation, make a compelling and convincing case for why we need to press the pause button on data centers, that is, establish a temporary moratorium until their harms can be fully assessed and understood, and rules and regulations put in place to protect our health, our communities, and our environment from the runaway damage this industry is already inflicting. So, what are the known risks and harms of data centers? Why should New York look before we leap? So I'm going to briefly touch upon four concerns: their enormous energy footprint, providing a lifeline for fossil fuels, skyrocketing electricity costs, and drained water resources. So, data centers consume a mind-boggling amount of energy. I'm going to throw out a few statistics. In 2020, data centers around the world consumed the amount of electricity used by over 21 million U.S. households. Even so, the International Energy Agency predicts that global energy use will triple from 2020 to 2030, thanks to developments in AI and cryptocurrency. In the United States alone, annual data center energy demand could constitute 12% of national demand by 2028, equivalent to the energy used by over 55 million U.S. households. AI technology in particular consumes an incredible amount of energy in every step. For example, simple text searches on ChatGPT use nearly 10 times as much electricity as a non-AI Google search. And where does all this energy come from? Largely from dirty energy sources. Data centers are extending the life of oil, gas, and coal power plants that were scheduled to be retired. Big tech is reviving nuclear power plants, including 3 Mile Island in Pennsylvania. You remember that one. And data centers rely on backup generators, and lots of them, including highly polluting ones fueled by diesel. And that voracious appetite for energy comes at a cost, a huge cost, to ratepayers like us. Utilities often compete to attract data centers while raising the rates for captive residential customers. U.S. electric and gas utilities requested $31 billion in rate increases in 2025. That's double what they requested in 2024. Average residential electricity prices in the U.S. soared 31% from 2000 to 2025, compared to just 4% from 2015 to 2020. The demand for energy and related infrastructure costs associated with AI are linked to these skyrocketing energy prices. And finally, data centers are endangering our water supplies. Data centers use massive amounts of water for cooling their servers, which run super hot. We estimate that by the year 2028, U.S. data center needs just for cooling could be as high as the indoor needs of 18.5 million U.S. households. And please note that nearly 3/4 of a data center's water use is associated with producing the electricity it needs. All this and more, gobbling up of farmland, lots of noise, very few permanent jobs, massive government subsidies, huge amounts of electronic waste. the risk of a massive boom and bust, and of course, all the social harm stemming from AI. There's a lot not to like, folks, a lot not to like. And that's the conclusion from what we do know about data centers. What we don't know, well, we don't know. What we do know and what we don't know are two compelling reasons to press the pause button on data centers in New York. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eric. That's a great overview of the situation that we're in. And now we're going to hear from Allison DeSario. She's going to share her slides out with everyone.
Great, so you should be able to see that. Is that right?
It's still loading. Oh, there it is. Yes.
Okay, great. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here today to learn about this topic. My name is Allison, and I'm going to be talking about the local struggle in Lansing that we've been dealing with. I have a bachelor's degree in environmental biology, so that, along with the potential increased utility bills, are what drew me into this opposition last year. I'm a member of the 50-member group FLX Strong, who organized last year around this topic. Like so many other communities across the nation, our group has come together to push back against a huge AI data center project being imposed on us by wealthy, non-local interests. Initially, the group was local Lansing residents, but as word has spread about the hyperscale AI data center proposed by TeraWulf on Cayuga Lake, our group continues to grow and network with others across the state. All perspectives expressed in this presentation are my own. So, in August 2025, TeraWulf, who the CEO is Paul Prager, entered into an 80-year lease with Cayuga Operating Company, LLC. The president is Paul Prager. More on that later. And since then, they have been developing plans to open an AI data center on the shores of Cayuga Lake at a retired coal power plant. Representatives from TeraWulf have said that by the end of their project, 400 megawatts of power demand is their goal. It will be worked on in 3 phases over the construction build-out. In their environmental assessment forms, they list that 43 acres will be clear-cut, leveled, and built on. Also on the site owned by Cayuga Operating Company is a partially unlined 42-acre coal ash landfill, and downhill from that, a 1.8-acre retention pond for leachates. Cayuga Operating Company's state discharge permit allows it to drain 24 to 30 million gallons of contaminated effluent annually into Cayuga Lake. TeraWulf has mentioned multiple times that Google is their largest shareholder and may be a client at the Lansing site. They also have agreements to deliver over 70 megawatts to Core 42 at their Somerset, New York facility. Core 42 is a subsidiary of G42, who has a joint venture called Presite, located in Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates, which is involved in AI policing and digital ID services. They have said at the Lansing site they hope to start the construction build-out in late 2026 and continue for 3 years. In this satellite view, you can see the landfill, and to the west and downhill, the massive area where their 3 data center buildings and new electrical substation would be constructed. Here's another view provided by Ramble, the company who did the wetlands surveys for TeraWulf. And you can see the purple wetlands areas surrounding the buildings, and a blue line going through those wetlands, which is new power transmission lines that they're proposing to construct. Potential negative impacts that we foresee include massive increase to electricity demand, which will likely cause price increases for NYSEG customers, sound impacts on neighbors and wildlife, construction disturbance and noise for years, stormwater runoff and coal ash landfill issues, and climate impacts. In other parts of the country, we have seen added grid infrastructure costs often get spread to all the ratepayers. According to an article from Harvard Law today, quote, more demand for energy with no corresponding increase in supply means higher prices for everyone, and other consumers often foot the bill for the complicated infrastructure needed to hook these facilities up to the system, end quote. A Bloomberg News analysis of wholesale electricity prices for tens of thousands of locations across the country reveals the effects of the AI boom on the power market with unprecedented granularity. The analysis found that electricity costs now as much as 267% more for a single month than it did 5 years ago in areas located near significant data center activity. This project would consist of 24/7 operations. Equipment involved in this industry produces low-frequency sound, which travels farther than higher frequencies and penetrates buildings and windows. It is located on the lakefront, and due to construction and erosion that will come with it, there will be few large trees to block the sound from traveling across the lake, despite TeraWolf claiming that their 55 decibel noise will stop at the property line. Wildlife, such as some bird species, cannot tolerate human noise above 50 decibels. Herons, for example, will move away and never return to noisy locations. I have personally seen from a boat on the lake dozens of herons roosting at night only slightly south of the old coal power plant. Songbirds also have lower mating success when human noise disrupts their mating songs. TeraWolf has listed in their short environmental assessment form that there is a potential of northern long-eared bats on the site who are federally endangered that would undoubtedly be impacted by 24/7 noise. During the planned 3-year construction phase, there will be heavy truck traffic, as well as construction noise from digging into the hillside, which has shallow bedrock in places that will need to be blasted. The level of on-site environmental monitoring all of this disturbance would require is typically not available. There is a risk of erosion from clear cutting and leveling the steep hillside, especially considering the coal ash landfill is already leaking and is vulnerable to construction disturbance. Running equipment over wetlands can alter the groundwater flow, introduce invasive species to wetlands, stir up sediments, and endanger fish and other aquatic life, and more. The creation of a 43-acre impervious surface will increase negative impacts of runoff into Cayuga Lake, which is already suffering from increasing harmful algal blooms. The 400 megawatts they plan to use by the final stage of their project is enough to serve about 450,000 average New York State homes. They claim this will be predominantly clean energy, but the electric supply from this much demand is likely to come from fracked gas peaker plants, which are plants that operate during peak demand times. TeraWolf has said that they will buy from NYSEG directly, which has a much higher carbon content than contracting from hydro or solar suppliers. Ultimately, this undermines the New York climate law goal of decarbonizing our grid. We have many reasons to believe that TeraWolf can't be trusted to be a green and responsible neighbor, contributing positively to the community as they say they will. TeraWolf's commitment to sustainability since day one is complicated by its history. The company's management team, including CEO Paul Prager, trace their roots to Beowulf Energy LLC, an operator of fossil fuel power plants that previously revived a struggling coal plant to mine Bitcoin. Then TeraWolf was formed in 2021. They only have 2 operating Bitcoin mines and missed their Bitcoin mining revenue estimates by 93% in 2023. TeraWolf has had net losses every year from 2021 to 2025 of large amounts, from 95.7 million to 661.4 million. There has already been a lawsuit filed in Somerset, New York, to reduce their property taxes from earlier agreed assessments, and their CEO is involved in self-dealing with his multiple nested LLCs and private companies. Bicent Power LLC, which Paul Prager was the president of, started in 2007 with 2 power plants, 1 coal and 1 natural gas. Bicent was forced to declare bankruptcy in 2012, in part because it failed to manage the financial repercussions of massive cost overruns at a power generation facility it was trying to buy in Hobbs, New Mexico. Bicent was forced to pay $22 million in arbitration due to its grossly negligent performance. Also in 2012, they came up with a plan for reorganization and came out of bankruptcy protection. TeraWolf has since bought Bicent Power LLC for $54.6 million in 2025. And you can see there's a bit more information on the slide about the old coal plant that they revived. And in 1 year, the emissions went up 900% just to operate a Bitcoin mine. There have been some misleading claims of their energy sources. In 2024, their marketing was, quote, 93% zero carbon energy. but it was revealed by Hunter Brook Financial News and investigative reporting that a lot of these claims were not true, and only months later their marketing changed, as you can see in these screenshots of their website. New York Power Authority, which supplies 45% of Somerset facilities' energy, told Hunter Brook none of the power that NYPA provides the firm can be claimed as renewable power. The rest of TeraWulf's power is sourced from the New York grid, which is less than half zero carbon, according to NISO. TeraWulf's claims of using excess renewable energy that would otherwise go to waste are also contradicted by state energy officials and experts who say there is no surplus renewable power in New York. I keep talking about the Somerset facility. In Somerset, New York, Somerset Operating Company, Paul Prager is the president, defaulted on their payment in lieu of taxes agreement and its property taxes. Somerset Operating Company argued in their lawsuit against the county, town, and school district that because there existed at the time of the agreement a state program, New York State Power Plant Cessation Mitigation Program, to compensate taxing authorities for lost revenues due to power plant closures, they shouldn't have to pay the pilot payments they agreed to or the property taxes they were assessed. The county, town, and school district agreed to accept reduced pilot and property tax payments. Further, they agreed to decrease the assessed value of the existing parcels, therefore reducing future property tax payments. As a part of determining the back tax payments, an agreement was also reached to reduce the assessment on the property from $13.3 million to $8.7 million. Somerset Operating Company received reductions of about $4.4 million, not including the town agreeing to lessen their special district taxes owed by 80%. This is a huge issue to us because in Lansing, one of their biggest promises is to contribute to the tax base. If this is their history, how can we trust them to actually come through with that? At the Lansing site, we see a complicated web of LLCs operating, and they all lead back to Paul Prager. There is currently a water withdrawal permit filed under the DEC, with the DEC under the Cayuga Operating Company for 100 million gallons per day from Cayuga Lake, using supposedly defunct water intake infrastructure that has been unused since the coal plant closed, according to TeraWulf representatives. As Anna Callis wrote in her guest opinion in the Ithaca Times, quote, "This corporate structure separates operational and environmental responsibility. The data center operation sits inside the public company, while land ownership and environmental permits remain with Prager-controlled private entities. The separation creates a legal and rhetorical buffer that can obscure where industrial impacts originate and who is responsible," end quote. Furthermore, if the Cayuga facility withdraws significant water from the lake, but the permit is held by the private landlord, TeraWulf can publicly claim that it does not itself use lake water. And the last bullet point there, you can see some reasons why corporations would use these nested LLCs. TeraWulf has constantly had financial challenges and shortcomings. 90% of TeraWulf's 2025 revenues were derived from Bitcoin mining. The company disclosed in its latest annual report that, quote, "We have recorded historical losses and negative cash flows from our operations," end quote, reporting a net loss in every year of its operations since going public. You can see the net losses listed there. They're enormous. Paul Prager and Beowulf have gone to extreme lengths to siphon money from TeraWulf, even resorting to selling electrical infrastructure and equipment located at their own facility in Somerset for $632,000. To tie it back to the Lansing opposition specifically, the massive AI data center project was voted 3-2 by the Zoning Board of Appeals to be classified as general processing under the Industrial District Code, since there is no mention of data centers in the existing zoning code. Since then, Finger Lake Strong filed an Article 78 proceeding against the Town of Lansing ZBA, TeraWulf, Cayuga Operating Company, Lake Hawkeye, and Fred Del Favero, who's the project manager listed on official forms. The suit alleges that the Zoning Board of Appeals made fundamental errors of law and violated lawful procedure by stretching the definition of general processing to include modern data centers. The suit contends that the term historically applies to light manufacturing or physical processing, not digital or computational activity. There were also procedural problems in how the zoning board handled the appeal, including an expedited review process, limited time for deliberation, and bias by the zoning board chair who cast the deciding vote. Even the Zoning Board of Appeals Chair, Jack Young, admitted in a Tompkins Weekly article the board was under some timely pressure because the Zoning Board of Appeals would have new membership in 2026 following some retirements on the board. He said, "We would have had to probably start over again." The most important part of the ZBA process, the Zoning Board of Appeals process that we have learned from, that we hope others can take our advice about, is to have your town define all of the words and phrases in your zoning codes. Have your town research and document what the original intent of the phrases were, even the ones that seem obvious, because you never know if a multi-million-dollar company will come into your town and try to make their square peg project fit into a round hole. Goods, warehouse, and general processing were not defined in Lansing's town codes, giving TerraWolf an in to twist the meanings to fit their project. Going forward, we plan to keep attending zoning planning board meetings to have the most strict restrictions and environmental controls put on this project, hopefully dissuading TerraWolf from this plan altogether, if the AI bubble doesn't burst by then. We are also fundraising for legal fees and an ongoing regional education and awareness campaign. No Data Center FLX operates a mailing list and an active website, Instagram, and Facebook, which you can follow along to get updates as they occur. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. Appreciate that run through. There's a lot of complex detail in the TerraWolf story to try to present in just a few minutes. So now we're going to switch over to Anna Kellis to hear about what we're doing at the state level.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you, Allison and Eric, for setting this up and giving all that background information. I'm going to give a little bit of background information that sort of set the impetus for this piece of legislation that I want to share. And some of it is in the bill memo, so you can follow up and read it there. But I'll start with a little bit of the information that's in that. A Bloomberg analysis of wholesale electricity prices found that 70% of locations with year-on-year price increases were within 50 miles of significant data center activity. Nationally, household electricity rates increased 13% in 2025, largely driven by the development of data centers, was part of their conclusion. The projected tripling of data centers across the nation in the next 5 years would result in data centers consuming more electricity than 28 million households. Data center electricity usage in New York has been projected to increase by more than 9,000 megawatts, which is approximately double the electricity use of all New York households combined. I think that I just want to let that sink in. The other piece of this, of course, is water consumption. A tripling of data centers nationwide would require the equivalent water usage of 18.5 million households just for cooling the servers. Data centers convert agricultural and other non-industrial land to industrial usage, removing farmland, woodland, and other resources, while driving up land values and property taxes. The computing hardware used to run AI, including microchips and processing, memory, and storage components, has a lifespan of 2 to 5 years and is regularly replaced with updated versions even before that window. As a result, the current AI boom will be responsible for generating up to 5 million tons of e-waste annually by 2030. So those sort of set the foundation of why we put this moratorium in place. But I do want to reiterate something that Eric said, which is very, very important. That we set this moratorium in place, and very specifically a moratorium, because the boom has happened so fast, and it is happening so fast, that governments have not had the opportunity to set any guardrails in place, any protections, any guidelines, any infrastructure within law. So this is really just to say, hold on, create a pause so that the government can catch up and ensure that it minimizes its impact on water, impact on greenhouse gas emissions, impact on utility rates for residents, for commercial and industrial current users in New York State, New Yorkers. And then when we have those regulations in place, then we can reopen in a responsible way. So another piece of information that I did want to bring up, and there, even if you Google this, you'll find this. Originally, when we looked and we were preparing for this bill, we found that there were similar bills in 5 other states: Georgia, Maryland, Virginia, Oklahoma, and Vermont. And you'll notice from this that it's bipartisan, very bipartisan, actually leaning Republican. I just looked this morning, and just in the last month since I put this information together, there are now 12 states that have introduced some version of a moratorium. So it's expanding rapidly across the country in direct response to what I've just shared. There are currently already over 130 data centers in New York State. And according to a recent governor's press release in February 12th, there are 48 large load requests in the NYISO interconnection queue, representing a combined total of over 11 gigawatts. 11 gigawatts. And remember, I just said 9 gigawatts doubles the current demand of the households in New York State. This is over that 11 gigawatts of new large load, with many of these projects related to energy-intensive industries such as data centers. So a significant percentage of these 11 gigawatts. In that release, the governor said these large loads potentially impose costs on ratepayers in terms of the upgrades needed for the interconnection and the impact it will have on reliability and electric supply. And I want to step back for a second, because what we'll hear a lot from data centers is, well, we're paying for the interconnection. We're paying for all the infrastructure. But when you add like a 400 megawatt load to a system, for example, or a 700 or a 1 gig load in one location, it doesn't actually only affect the utility bills surrounding the local area. It can actually also increase the utility bills across the entire network. So NYSEG's entire grid network, it can increase it. Why? Because if you think of electrons flowing through its entire network, like blood flowing through a body, if you pull a load in one place, or a spider web, it can actually create instability in reliability across the entire network. It can. So you may need to increase high voltage utility lines, or add substations, or change relationships with other suppliers of energy across the entire grid, hundreds of miles away from where you've added this significant load. So that needs to be, all of that needs to be evaluated. So when they say they're doing that interconnection, they cannot fully counter the impact that they are having on the utility bills across the state. The other thing that's really important to note is, because we live in the Northeast, and because we have such high and low temperatures and high variance of humidity levels, it is not efficient to have cooling systems that are completely dry cooling systems that don't use water. If you look at the scientific literature and evaluation across the entire planet of what types of cooling systems are cost effective and efficient in different areas of the world, in the Northeast of the United States, the systems that are the most efficient and cost effective are those that are either fully water-based cooling systems, or at the most are hybrid. When they can do air-based, they can, but they have to incorporate in the water cooling systems, which is why TeraWulf submitted a permit renewal to continue with a maximum of 1 million gallons of water withdrawal per day from Cayuga Lake. So the moratorium that we put in place is a 3-year moratorium. And the moratorium would be on all data centers during this window. And it would require that the DEC do a full environmental impact statement. or environmental impact assessment. And this, we put in the bill very specific requirements. They can add more to this, but there are very specific requirements that they would have to include in this environmental impact assessment. For example, it must include the number, size, in acreage, current and maximum gigawatt capacity and location of current data centers in the state, active proposals for new data centers, and projections for future growth of data centers, so we can get a sense of the magnitude of the issue, the electricity consumption by data centers, including the amount of electricity used by data centers within the state, identification of the generation sources for the electricity, the impact of data center development on monthly electricity and gas rates for residents, for commercial consumers and industrial consumers, the impact of data center development on the bulk system operator interconnection queue. That is partly what I was just talking about. The impact of data center development on transmission development, transmission constraints, and other issues related to grid reliability throughout all load zones identified by the bulk system operator. That again is exactly what I was talking about, that it can't just be local. They have to look at what the network-wide, grid-wide impacts would be. How data center development has impacted capital planning, spending, and maintenance needs for electric corporations and gas corporations. So when we get new rate cases from utility companies, the formula that is used that allows them to increase our rates is based on a rate base that is determined by the size of their grid. And when they put together a rate case, they're saying not only are these the deferred maintenance that we have, but this is the projected infrastructure needs that we are saying we are going to need as a utility over the next X number of years. That's based on proposals to some extent. So, to a large extent, there's trying to project and then build out. So what this is saying is, what is that projected increased demand and need that they will have? How data centers development has impacted that capital planning. Then we go to water consumption and discharge by data centers, the amount of water used by data centers for cooling, the daily rate of consumption of water from such sources, the amount of water discharge from data centers, the amount of water consumed by cooling systems lost to evaporation or in any way not returned to the water of the state. And then we go to land use for data centers, and this includes total acreage used for existing data centers, the type and amount of land that's been rezoned from other zoning categories for use by data centers, the impact on land values and property taxes within a 10-mile radius. These are some of the things that we would be looking at for the impact on land use. It includes impact on farmland, and that's really important. Then we go to what is the impact on pollution from data centers. And that includes the amount of greenhouse gases emitted, the types and quantity of air pollution, the types and quantity of water pollution. And I'll step back for a moment. This is really important because very often, and there was a science article that came out. This is a scientific, peer-reviewed, published article. And what it noted was that in the United States, very often data centers will lie by omission by only referring to the inner loop, the closed loop water system. So there's a two-loop system. There's the closed loop, and that's typically a water loop that is fully closed, that is pulling the heat out of the air around the room where the computer processes are. Then you have the outer loop that's either fully air or a hybrid air-water or fully water that pulls then the heat out of that inner loop. So oftentimes they'll only say, well, we're a fully closed loop system, but they're only referring to the inner loop, simply just not talking about the outer loop that cools that inner loop. If that outer loop is water at any level, which is the most typical in New York and in the Northeast, that loop is pulling from some external source, like a body of water, like lakes, and it has to do a system called blowdown on a regular basis to release the water that it has been circulating and pull new water in. And that loop often has a lot of chemicals in it that prevent algal growth, that prevent bacterial growth, antifreeze so that it doesn't freeze. And then all of these chemicals are being dumped back in the lake. We don't even know the full recipe, shall we say, of these chemicals. So there's that requirement now finally getting that full list of what are those chemicals, and then what are those chemicals, what are the pollutants, what are the impact of those. Then additionally, the level of noise pollution, and then electronic waste from the data centers, current volume, current method of being used to dispose of or recycle, projection from the changes to these amounts from both the existing but then proposed and projected growth of data centers, and projections of future data center growth within the state. So it needs to take that into consideration because, of course, that would affect all of this information that they collect. So within those 3 years, they need to release that full environmental impact statement. They then need to put out regulations that they propose that would minimize the impact of data centers on all of these factors in the state. And it also requires that the PSC no sooner than that 3 years. So it has to give those 3 years for the moratorium to collect that data and do all of that assessment. And then based on the EIS that's collected, then the PSC would do a regulatory change, also supporting and ensuring minimal effect of data centers moving forward. So it is comprehensive and science-based to ensure that moving forward, this boom does not completely dysregulate our economy and also dysregulate and disrupt our ecosystem. So both of those being very critical for the integrity and of many economies, of many industries that we all depend on for as New York to stabilize our entire system in our state. So I'm going to leave it there, open it for questions. Thank you so much, Gabe, for putting this together.
You're welcome, Anna. And yes, there is so much ground to cover in this topic. I don't even know how many hundreds of articles I've read over the last 6 months about AI data centers and all there's Eric with his sign. But looking at the questions, looks like Evie from Evie Wackett had a question about the closed loop cooling systems, but I felt like you just addressed that in your
Yes.
recent remarks there about, it isn't as benign as it sounds.
Yep.
And there are these chemicals. It reminds me of the fracking fight where it was all, confidential, corporate secret, what exactly was in the fracking fluids. That then were redistributed.
But I do want to point out, so she noted anti-corrosives, biocides, and other chemicals, absolutely. But the comment is they end up in the wastewater system and then eventually into our water supply. But actually, if they have a full water permit, Speedy's permit, they have the ability actually to release directly into the water as well. So it can end up, yes, in our wastewater systems, if they are connected to the municipal systems, or they can end up just directly into the waterways and water bodies. So I think that's really important.
And George Adams had a question about these claims of benefiting the community in terms of job creation,
Yeah.
or tend to be weak. And his question was, are there any clearly identified beneficiaries of this data center besides TeraWulf?
So they very often inflate the job projections in two ways. One is almost a majority of them are short term, with the construction of the facility, and that does benefit. Those do. I want to minimize that. Those are creating union jobs if they are using union labor. Or local jobs. They are temporary, however. So if you're looking at the long-term impact and viability and integrity of the community, the amount of jobs that it creates are very small. The last estimate that I saw for the facility was less than 50 jobs. But what I have read from, many researchers and people who are experts in the field, many of those jobs, and I can't say the number, but it changes by data center, aren't jobs that are actually local. They can be remote jobs, and we don't know how many those are. So that's something that we need to take into consideration as well. So looking at the long-term impacts, I have been focusing with the unions on ensuring that we are moving forward, with other smart developments. Like I've been working for years on the Southworks development, which will create an entire interactive, community where people can walk, eat, play in the same place. Hopefully, we will create a thermal energy network, so it'll be, also net zero. That will create tons of union jobs for many years. So, I do work with the unions, absolutely try to promote good paying jobs, but ones that won't destroy the environment for them and everyone else, and increase their utility bills at the end. So they'll make temporary money, but then it'll be more expensive to live here. So, we have to look at all of it comprehensively.
One thing I'll note is that this is a very important question that we addressed in the report that we released last week, which is available for folks who want to check it out on our website, and hopefully will be sent in a follow-up email. But it says that in 2021, a Microsoft data center in Illinois received more than $38 million in tax exemptions, but created only 20 permanent jobs. And a Business Insider analysis found that even the largest data centers typically employ fewer than 150 permanent workers, with some employing as few as 25.
And I've also read from people who are programmers who have vouched for the fact that, hey, they're counting me as a local job, but I'm over here in Indiana, as a data prompter employee. So it's not bringing those nice add-on multiplier effects of local, employees who live their lives and spend their money here locally. Um, George has another interesting question. Can any federal agency override our local efforts to rescue the environment and our pocketbooks from this power grab by billionaires? I think he's referencing Trump's
Mm.
recent announcements about how we're going to have the AI data centers be responsible. And there's this letter that has been signed by a bunch of them big tech companies saying that they'll behave themselves. It has no teeth and no enforcement. But you do have to worry about what is the possibility of federal overreach on this. Anna or Eric, you any idea of
Yeah.
how that would play out in court?
I mean, I think that very weak. I feel very confident about this. I mean, one of the things that they focus on is the interstate, commerce challenges. But this bill I mean, it's neutral because it applies to all developers equally, regardless of location. So, if you look historically, courts have allowed for environmental moratorium, land use pauses, planning studies. So as long as they're temporary and they're non-discriminatory, it doesn't hold up in court. And then there's, another pathway that, I've heard discussed, which is federal preemption, using the Federal Power Act. And I'm not a lawyer, but these are the things that I have studied, because the authority does not extend to land use or siting of facilities like data centers. So states traditionally retain power over land use and zoning, environmental permitting, building permits, industrial siting. And because this is regulating permitting for buildings and not electricity markets, which electricity markets would be more interstate, it stays narrow, and that is a very weak argument. So those are some pathways that I've heard mentioned, and they're very weak.
I want to highlight a political note that the assembly member brought up, which is that this is a nonpartisan, bipartisan issue. We are seeing strong opposition from MAGA Republicans, including the governor of Florida, who's a pretty right-wing Republican. This is an issue that's embraced by, people in rural communities, suburban communities, across the political spectrum. So I would expect if the Trump administration were to seriously move forward and squelching, local policy endeavors, that we would see a lot of pushback from Republicans, and understandably and rightfully so. And with that in mind, I would encourage all of us to have a very open mind in organizing and advocating for this bill, reaching out to people across the political spectrum. This is a bipartisan, nonpartisan issue, and our organizing and our outreach and our community building efforts should, reflect that.
Thanks, Eric. Diane has a question. Does the governor acknowledge the information that Anna just reported and the DEC? Are they taking in this, information and seeing it through the same lens?
Well, part of why I felt confident in introducing it, and I'm so thankful that you asked that question, because in her State of the State, and actually this is the day that it happened, in her State of the State, she specifically talked about the fact that data centers do not create jobs, significant jobs, that they use a significant amount of energy, which of course increases our dependency on fossil fuels, and they increase utility bills. So data centers should be responsible for the energy that they use and the cost of the energy that they use, and she discussed requiring data centers to have their own clean energy behind the meter. So it was a lot of acknowledging that. Since then, an official proceeding of the PSC has begun to evaluate large energy loads like data centers and their impact, so that they can proceed eventually with regulations. However, they note, PSC themselves, and you can find there's an article that came out a couple weeks ago, that even to do an initial white paper, which they're saying that they need to do to start to create the parameters of the proceeding, won't come out until early next year. Then the process would start, which will probably take at least another year. So if that is her process that she needs to put in place in order to enact the very thing that she is saying we need to have in place to minimize the impact of these data centers, then this piece of legislation is explicitly and directly in support of what she is looking for. So I think that these are completely complementary, given her own words and her own initiatives and her own intentions.
Yeah, and so incredibly important that we have the moratorium, because if it takes us 2 years to get some controls in place and there's nothing to prevent a free-for-all in that entire 2 years, well, there's just going to be what that woman say, it's when the crying starts.
Yeah, and also, it's what's important too in this is that it will provide all of the comprehensive environmental information to the PSC for the PSC to make those decisions. Currently, the PSC doesn't have this data, and it should be based on this data. This is literally every single piece of evidence that they would need to ensure that what they put in place, that they say they want to put in place to address the very thing the governor said, so that their impact is minimized. This is what they need in order to make that decision. So it really is a perfect fit.
It really is. Well, we'll pivot just a little bit now to Kelly Doolittle, who wanted Allison to talk again about defining all the words in our town policies and our zoning local codes.
Yeah, so that was a huge thing for us. So the project went through the Zoning Board of Appeals in Lansing because the code enforcement officer interpreted that by the town zoning, an AI data center does not fit. So they had TeraWolf was appealing that and saying that they fit as a scientific research facility, a warehouse, and as general processing. So they came to this zoning board of appeals meeting, and there's there's a video that No Data Center FLX account has posted where it's just Paul Prager going back and forth on the different little nuances of each different thing. And if you're doing scientific research facility as your definition, you can't sell anything. But if you're doing warehouse, you can sell something. So all of there was contradictions in everything that he was saying. And ultimately, since data center wasn't listed in the codes, there was no way for the town to say, well, this data center, which processes and does, you know, like computer processing equipment and things, there's no way for them to say that that's not general processing, even though what was probably meant by general processing was something related to a tangible item like, agricultural products and things like that. So even the word goods, you can have your town define goods to mean a physical good, not an intangible good. What does general processing mean? What does warehouse mean? And does an AI hyperscale AI data center that has 43 acres of computing equipment count as a warehouse? It seems pretty obvious that it doesn't, but again, they're trying and made all these fumbles and contradictions in their attempts to fit this AI data center into the town codes. So just defining all the codes.
Yeah.
Thanks, Allison. To continue on that theme, we have a couple questions. Is there, and for those who maybe aren't from Tompkins County, the town of Dryden recently did pass a regulation, a ban on data centers, defined what a data center is and passed a ban on it. So that closes the door, just like the town of Dryden did the same thing with fracking some years back. And because we're a home rule state, it stood up in court. They knew that they would be attacked, but it stood up in court. So we should be taking advantage of that. Deborah has a question. Is there a model zoning law that addresses the shortcomings apparent because of the Somerset article? Well, the Article 78 action was actually ours, not Somerset's. And then Chad had a question of, have any local governments been successful in challenges to local laws prohibiting data centers? Anybody who's already done that, have they defended it?
Yes, sorry, Gay. I can share some of the research that I have found, and I recommend looking at the American Planning Association actually has a model zoning guidance, and their approach recommends that local laws define data centers clearly and distinguish them from general office or industrial uses. Require special use permits rather than allowing them as of right. Requiring findings related to energy demands, water use, and emergency power systems. And it's really important not to forget the emergency power systems, backup systems, because those often are fossil fuel-based systems. They can be battery, of course, as well, and that brings in a lot of additional pieces of how you would specify zoning requirements related to batteries. Include in the zoning noise limits, cooling technology standards, and generator restrictions. Those are things that they say are important. Obviously, what's happening with Somerset is vague zoning categories that allow developers to argue the use is permitted by right. And that's why they need to be very specific. There's one that I read that is, I think, maybe a good model to look at, and that's in Loudoun County in Virginia. And they created this. They have data centers treated as, the separate land use classification, special exemption permits, noise limits, generator and cooling systems, power infrastructure visibility. Like, they included all of that. So I would look at what they did. Minnesota also has a model ordinance that they're working on that I'm tracking. So those are some of the things that like begin the conversation. But I will say, because there are 12 states that are addressing this directly, it is growing quickly. But those are all great places to start.
Absolutely. And what we could maybe do is try to pull some of those links to those model ordinances and include that when we send out the recording and Eric's links and Allison's links as
Mhm.
well.
Mhm.
And there's a group called New York State Fights Data Centers. It's just a whole bunch of nonprofit groups. Um, that's where I met Eric. And lots of people who are fighting the huge stamp data center, mega data center proposal out there near Buffalo. And they're trying to pull together draft ordinances that local towns and villages can use and adopt to defend themselves. Um, we have a few more questions. David McCune just brings up the fact that for the two-loop system for water cooling and the pollution in that, he wants to make sure we all understand also about the thermal impact of if it's a water loop going back and we're using the lake to cool that loop of water, that we're adding all this heat to the lake, affecting the fish populations and the ecology. And it definitely is one of those little boosters for harmful algae blooms to have the water being heated up further. And then Donna wondered if you could comment on the recent Ohio EPA weighing in allowing data centers to release untreated wastewater and stormwater into streams and rivers. Isn't the EPA supposed to protect our waters?
Well, I mean, I think that answered
Yeah,
the answer in that was in the question.
yeah,
Yes, yes, and it's heartbreaking. It's absolutely heartbreaking. Models what we're seeing at the federal level with all the rollbacks and water protections.
yeah. That's why we have to be strong at the state level. And the DEC, this needs to be front burner, I think, for the DEC to be ready to protect our water. Um, let's see. Um, Jill asks this, there's a lot of money in play. We know we're up against deep pocket entities. What does support look like on the Senate floor?
And the assembly. Yeah. So, I mean, that's a great question. The strategy is, that people reach out to their assembly members and senators and push to get them to co-sponsor, educate them, super important. Then the second is reaching out to leadership in both the Senate and the Assembly, um, making sure that they understand that as voters, this is like the single most important issue for you. That is actually really important. That's the messaging. As a voter, this is your single most important issue. And in particular, prioritizing the fact that this is going to make New York unlivable because of the cost of living, but also polluting the natural resources that so much of our economy depends on. I think those two things are really important. Writing op-eds, coming to Albany and doing rallies are really important, bringing large groups of people. But I think op-eds, education, building coalitions, so that there's a really clear movement. People need to understand, this is the last thing that I will say that's so important. People need to understand how it will affect their lives personally. I can talk till I'm blue in the face on how it's going to affect blue herons, how it's going to affect the ecosystem, how it's going to affect water quality. But when I tell them it's going to affect their utility bills next month and they're already feeling the pressure, all of a sudden, like, we 10 times the amount of people, right, jump on and say, whoa, 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 wait a minute. I can't even feed my children right now. I need a new car. My car is breaking. That's literally how I've stabilized my family because, I can't get to work without it. And I need to put $600 in it. And last month, my utility bill went up $300. So now I can't fix my car, right? Like those things are very visceral. So that message is important. And I wish that, we made the deeper connection of environment and our quality of life, but those making it visceral is critical.
I would like to just add 2 points. First of all, it's well noted that we're up against not only one, not only two, but three well-heeled industries: fossil fuels, big tech, and finance, crypto. So it's up. We're up against a lot. However, Food and Water Watch and our allies and Gay well noted that we're part of a vast network of activists and organizations and allies. We're committed to building the power and exerting the influence that we need to take on and defeat these industries. And we have a host of tools and resources, fact sheets, flyers, online tools that will help you, not only educate and engage, people in your community, but also influence your elected officials, Republicans, Democrats, and everyone in between to co-sponsor and support and move this bill through the fairly, admittedly, complicated legislative process. And again, just one final thing, Assembly members Kellis is absolutely right. This is a personal issue for a lot of people. I don't know if you can see this brand new sign
Yes.
that we just got that says no rate hikes. We've got hundreds of those signs, and we're looking forward to opportunities to display them in Albany. So please stay tuned.
And I just wanted to, Gay, if you don't mind, make sure that the information that I shared, because I know I went really fast through it. One, this is being recorded, and you share it afterwards so people can go back to it, and I think that that's really important. But the other is I can give you some of these links, and you can put them in your follow-up email. But really quickly, the American Planning Association. If you do a Google search for the American Planning Association and look for their model, just type in Google, whatever search engine, model ordinance for data centers. And the one that I talked about that it's worth looking at is the one that Loudoun County, Loudoun, Loudoun County in Virginia, included. And there's a comment by George: the delivery charge on our NYSEG electricity bills is roughly the infrastructure and maintenance we pay for. That's what I was referring to when I talked about the rate base. And so when NYSEG just had a 62% rate hike in their last rate case. And the next month that rate case ended, they submitted a new rate case for an additional 37%. So turn around phenomenally quickly. I do want to end my comments by noting that there is a message that's going out that this is because of the CLCPA. It's because of the environmental work, and that is such a lie. Because for two reasons, and this is something I want everybody to take away with respect to this, is that if you look at a NYSO report themselves and information that's come out from NYSEG, both of them have been very explicit that the increases that we've seen in our utility bills is a result of increased prices for oil and gas. Very specifically, the 30 to 40% increase that we saw in utility bills were directly related to oil and gas this winter. And even more so, there has been direct reports that have come out as a result of the initiation of this war by our president and Israel. Our oil and gas prices went up even more. I think within the first day, 24 hours, it went up 10 to 15%. So oil and gas is the result of these increases that we are seeing that are immediate. First of all. Second of all, it can't be a result of the CLCPA because we haven't really implemented it yet. So how could it be a result of this? Because all of the things that we tried to put in place, the executive has paused. Cap and invest, All Electric Buildings Act, build public renewables, all we have done, rolling back the permit denial for Greenwich, fast tracking fossil fuel pipelines, expanding the Iroquois pipeline. There isn't anything that we have really done that has been a massive implementation of the CLCPA, except for some capital investments in thermal energy networks, for example. Hopefully this year, We will see some capital investments that push this forward. There have been plans that have come out, but implementation for the majority of the CLCPA scoping plan proposals have been paused. So, please, everyone, push back on that. Data centers are another reason that we will see massive increases in cost.
That's right. Thank you. Emily, do you want to pop up our closing slide? Because we have a call to action for all of you. As a result of participating in this webinar, we would like to see if you are an elected official or a planning board member or somehow involved in local government, could you please lead your fellow trustees and board members to pass a resolution in favor of the data center moratorium bill and funnel that on up to your state representatives? Of course, if you're in Tompkins and Cortland County, that'll be Anna, but send it there anyway so she
Yeah.
knows that your town and municipality did that. And if you're not an elected official, please go get in touch with them. Get in touch with your town board or your village trustees. Send a email to all of them with links to the Senate bill and the Assembly bill, and just say why you are in support of this moratorium, that we need it. We need to hit pause before we are just buried in a lot of problems down the road that are very hard to mitigate after the fact. So your homework is that call to action to let's get some resolutions passed in support of the moratorium bill. And Anna, were you going to say one more thing?
Yeah, just to add to that, in the resolution, you can say that it be sent to the governor and the speaker of the assembly and the majority leader of the Senate. So yes, it will come to me. It'll go to the chairs. You would also put the chairs of the Energy Committee and several other committees that are relevant. But it will get to
Could your
leadership.
staff send me a little,
Yep. Yep.
who is this being sent to? And then I'll also attach that when I put the stuff out with the recordings and all the
Yeah,
links. So
we can
big
work on
homework.
we can work on a template moratorium resolution.
Yes, that would be very, I think, handy for a lot of small towns. Um, well, I really want to thank everybody for hanging in there for this complex topic. We didn't get to all the questions, but we will try to take a look at them and see what we can make sure we can follow up on. George says, Anna, you always do the homework. Uh, Thank you, and Allison and Eric for making it clear what we can do. And I want to invite everybody to join us next month at our next Finger Lakes Forecast webinar on April 8th. It's, as I mentioned, going to be on wildfire risk, which we don't, we're not in the habit of thinking about that. That's California and out on the West Coast. But data is pointing at, drier forest with a lot of fuel in it. So we better get figuring on what we should be doing about that. So keep your eye out. Anybody who registered for this will get an invite to the next one. So keep your eye out for that and set aside April 8th at noon. I want to end by just again thanking Anna and Eric and Allison for all your hard work putting together
And
this
thank you,
information.
Gay. Thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
And I just also want to let everybody know we are Finger Lake Strong. I'm a member of that. We are going to be working on an op-ed campaign and letters to the editor about data centers and the moratorium bill. So if you like to write to your local papers, go ahead and email me, gay@sustainablefingerlakes.org, and we'll put you on the team that's going to be trying to educate folks all around the Finger Lakes region. It's not just Tompkins County, but all around the region, because with our lakes, we're all a target. um, and helping your local places get get properly defended is your next move. So again, thank you everyone, and so enjoyed this. It was great. Thank you.